Hey everybody, this is Pooka bringing you the top 4 from the Glendale, Wisconsin Battle Roads that I recently played in. Now normally I don't do commentary for my own games, but I decided to switch it up a little bit and I'll do sort of a first person commentary on this match. I was playing a bit of an unusual deck, which was just Vanilluxe, Vileplume, Victini. You get your Vanilluxe out, you get your Vileplume out, and Victini, basically you just double freeze your opponent, paralyze them over and over until you knock them out. And they really can't do anything about it because Vileplume shuts off trainers like Switch, and Paralysis locks them in place. So, unless they play cards like Unknown Cure or Espeon, they're just kind of stuck there. So, through this match, we're just kind of going to see what goes through my head and maybe how to approach it, and how to approach a best 2 out of 3 match for a tournament. So there's a lot of stuff going on that you might not think about that we'll cover here. Now right off the bat, I do get to go first, which is a major advantage. I actually start pretty perfectly. I start with a Virizion, which has 110 hit points. You know, it's not a great support Pokemon, but it can take a hit. Stuff like Smeargle, it's got 70 hit points. It's very good. Portrait is great. But it gets knocked out in one hit by Darkrai, knocked out in one hit by Tornadus EX, knocked out in one hit by, well, a lot of stuff. So, Virizion, even though it costs an energy to attack and only draws you 2 cards, it's just kind of there to buy time. You know, you get to draw 2 cards, that's okay. But Night Spear, that won't knock it out. Neither will Tornadus EX's Power Blast, so it's pretty good just for taking a hit. But anyway, I did start with a Pokemon Collector as well. And the first key here is I get 2 Oddishes and 2 Vanillites in play. Now my opponent does get a Dual Ball. Has to actually Junk Arm for it, but that's okay because he wants to be playing as many trainers as possible. He also wants to get Dark Energy in the discard pile for a Dark Patch. So, not too bad that he got 2 Tails for the first Dual Ball. He did get 1 Heads on the second one, but that's okay. He will play an N as well, but yeah, he wants to get trainers out of his hand immediately. But I guess this video series is going to be more geared towards what's happening on my side because, well, I know what's happening on my side, and my deck's probably more unusual to play. So I have 2 Oddishes in play and 2 Vanillites. That makes it so he can't just target one out. You need 2 Oddishes in play because Pokemon Catcher exists. So, and my opponent does use Smeargle's Portrait to get an N, so we'll shuffle in again and draw 6. But if you only have 1 Oddish in play and it gets Catchered, then you can't Rare Candy into Vileplume, and you'll never get it into play. This is pretty simple, but a lot of people don't realize that you can't get by with just having 1 Oddish on your bench. It's way too risky. Pokemon Catcher will just bring it out, and your Oddish will get knocked out before you evolve your Vileplume. So, step 1 is to get multiple Oddishes out on your field. So even if one gets knocked out, you can evolve the other one. You need to get Vileplume in play for this deck to work. The other thing is just have 2 Vanillites out because, hey, why not? Yeah, and if they target one down, you still have another one to evolve. Same concept as the Oddish, but the Vileplume is the more important part of this deck. Once you get that into play, it shuts down Pokemon Catcher and all sorts of stuff. So, Vileplume is number 1 priority, but Vanilluxe is obviously your attacker. So right here, my new 6 cards is actually very bad. I have a bunch of Pokemon, so I'm actually thankful to have Virizion up there and I can use Double Draw. And I draw a Rare Candy off of my 2 cards, so that's pretty good. And I also draw a Twins. So if he decides to get aggressive and take a knockout, I will have access to Twins, and I'll be able to start setting up. So right now, my opponent needs to start taking prizes and quickly, but if he does, then I can just use Twins, and then I'll get my Vileplume and I'll get set up. My biggest disadvantage at this point is that I don't have any energy in play. Vanilluxe does take 2 energy to attack, so you take 2 turns to power that up. Right now I have no energy on him, so that's fine. I don't expect to really be knocked out this turn. If I do, an Oddish will be knocked out, and I'm okay with that, because when you're playing a deck like this, you don't want to freak out and say, oh no, my opponent took a prize. I can't let that happen. Even though most decks, like, if I was also playing a Darkrai deck and my opponent took the first prize, I might get a little worried. I might think, okay, I'm behind a prize. I don't know if I can catch up. But the strength of the Vileplume deck is that, okay, you accept that you're going to fall behind on prizes because your deck is slower. But once you do set up, your deck is just that much more powerful than your opponent. So you can afford to fall behind because you make up for it by having the stronger deck when both decks set up. So, when you're using this Vanilluxe deck, you can actually afford to go down 2, even 3 prizes sometimes. 4 is the dangerous territory where you probably won't win anymore, but you could afford to go down 2 or 3 prizes as long as you get your setup eventually. And right here, I'm feeling pretty good because my opponent did play an N, gave me a new hand of 6, redeemed my 5 Pokemon hand that I had before. I draw Twins once again, which is great. And I have a Pokemon Communication in my hand as well. So I'll be able to get Gloom into play at the very least. In a perfect world, I'll get a rare candy, but I would have to top deck that. And my opponent uses Portrait. You can see my hand there. There's no supporter for him to use, but he knows if he takes a prize, I get to use Twins. So here I draw Vileplume, which is a good card to draw. I'm going to need that. But a rare candy would have been a little nicer, but I'm not going to complain about drawing Vileplume. So I'll be able to Communication for a Gloom. And this is kind of going to make my opponent do something. I have the Vileplume in my hand. I'm going to get the Gloom into play. What my opponent wants to do is prevent me from ever getting Vileplume out, because that is the game changer. That shuts off pretty much half of my opponent's deck. Decks nowadays run up to like 30 trainer cards between Junk Arm, Pokemon Catcher, Switch, etc. And you can't play those anymore. Your hand just gets clogged with cards you cannot play, and there's nothing you can really do about it once Vileplume comes out. So, it's got to be my opponent's priority here to knock out this Gloom. Even though you can see in my hand I have Rare Candy, Vileplume, and Twins, so I'm pretty safe for this game. The only thing missing is the Victini, but that's alright. I'll get to that eventually, I suppose. So, my opponent plays a random receiver, gets an Oak's New Theory, and I've been fairly fortunate that my opponent really has not done anything yet. And he has 2 of those already, so what's the third one? But my opponent has not gotten out to a quick start. The only way I would be in any real trouble against a Darkrai deck is if they started attacking turn 1 or turn 2 and just started plowing through my Pokemon and I fell way too far behind. If we're on even ground and I set up completely before he even takes a prize, that's pretty bad for the Darkrai deck, because Darkrai does not knock out Vanilluxe in one hit. And it's an EX. So, what will happen is, he can do 90 damage to a Vanilluxe, and then he gives up 2 prizes when Vanilluxe inevitably knocks it out with Double Freeze. This is a horrible trade-off for a Darkrai deck. So, in order to win, he has to get a prize lead in order to make up for this gross prize trade-off that Darkrai has with Vanilluxe. So, this third turn here, he's finally getting an attack off, which actually is fairly standard for Darkrai. Third turn attacking is not too unheard of. And he's going to go ahead and Night Spear the Virizion for 100 because of the plus power. And hit something for 30, he's deciding. And he's going to go for the Vanilluxe with the Rescue Energy. So, you're going to see this deck start to really come together right now from my side. I have pretty much everything I could ever want. I have a Rare Candy for the Vileplume this turn. That is perfect. This allows me to evolve my Gloom into a Blossom a little later, which is pretty neat. I'll be able to get Blossom out and use Hustle Step to remove some of the damage from my field. You can do that once every turn. And, yeah, I mean, I only play one Gloom in the deck. So once I play Rare Candy, or once I get Vileplume into play, I cannot play Rare Candy any longer. And as you can see there, I get the Victini. So my deck does take quite a bit to set up. You need the Vileplume, you need a Vanilluxe, and you need a Victini. If you're missing one of these elements, the deck does not function properly. I cannot stress that enough. If you're missing one piece of this 3-card combo, the deck does not work well at all. It turns into just kind of a mess. Your ice cream starts to melt pretty quickly. But my opponent does have an N. He's going to shuffle the Twins back into my deck. And right there, I actually contemplated putting down Smeargle in case of an N. I decided not to for some reason. Not sure why, but I did not play down the Smeargle, and now I'm at a bit of a risk because I might not draw a way to get a Vanilluxe next turn. Fortunately, I'm not down prizes yet. I'll only be down one prize by the time this is over here. So I can actually afford to lose one of my Vanilluxes as long as I get a Vanilluxe within the next couple turns. And my opponent will play a Sky Arrow Bridge. That's fine. That's not really going to do anything for me. It'll allow him to promote Smeargle after I get a knockout, which is good for him. But it's probably not going to impact the game too much. So right here, he gets the first prize. But as you can see, I'm already set up. So at this point, the game for me turns into conserving resources. I need to make sure I can get enough Vanilluxes out the rest of the game to win, and that I have enough energy to do so. And right now, I've lost 1 energy on that Virizion, so I play 11 energy. That means I have 10 left. 2 of them are on my Pokemon right now. Losing Vanilluxes and Vanillites, that's not an issue. I'll get the active one back with Rescue Energy. And Rescue Energy actually happens to be one of the most important cards in this entire deck. Stage 2 Pokemon are extremely difficult to get into play. And once they get knocked out, they're even more difficult to replace. So, the fact that Vanilluxe takes 1 water and 1 colorless is actually a really big deal. Because it allows Vanilluxe to get returned back into your hand with all the lower stages every time it gets knocked out. And it allows you to just get a chain of Vanilluxes over and over and over, whereas you would have to try to draw into more and more if you did not have Rescue Energy. So right here, I actually really hope to draw a Vanilluxe and a water, and I'm actually fortunate enough to do so. The bad part is that I do not have Victini in play quite yet, so I will not be able to reflip with Victory Star if I get 2 tails here, but I do get the Vanilluxe, and 75% chance that I will paralyze him, so feeling pretty good about my spot. I also get to use Hustle Step with Blossom. That's great, I get to heal the bench damage and the damage off the active. Once every turn you do get to heal 1 damage counter from every one of your Pokemon, and there we go, I double freeze and a double tails, so I would have been better off using Tropical Beach there if I would have known, but obviously you would go for the double freeze there. So that was kind of a lucky break for Chris, my opponent, but overall I am still not worried at all about my position. Now he does put down a Mewtwo, which is going to be probably his best shot at winning this game. Now, Mewtwo, even though yes, it is an EX, it'll give up 2 prizes, it has the ability to knock out Vanilluxe in 1 hit. So if he were able to get some prize lead, like 2 or 3 prizes, you can afford to trade 2 prizes for 1, as long as you're knocking out the Vanilluxe in 1 hit. So eventually he'll need to use that Mewtwo, but right now he gets an attack off with Darkrai. He'll be able to do 90 and then 30 to the bench of Vanilluxe, which is okay. So right there I draw the Victini, which would have been nice to draw last turn, but I drew a pretty good hand from my 6-card Copycat, so I am not going to complain about that at all. Right now, I'm just going to go ahead and grab my Victini finally. I already have one in my hand, but that's okay. I'll grab another one. Smeargle and a Vanillite. I really didn't need all those basics, but you might as well play the Pokemon Collector to thin out your deck Those are 3 cards you really don't want to draw, so you take them out of your deck and put them into your hand. So right now, really there's not much else to think about with my deck. I have the setup, I have the Vanilluxe, the Vileplume, and the Victini, and I'm just going to start using Double Freeze. And once my Vanilluxe gets knocked out, I have the Rescue Energy to get it back. And right here I get a Double Freeze for 80 damage, which is pretty nice. And it's going to paralyze him. So this is why Darkrai decks do not do very well against Vanilluxe decks. Sure, he took, well, 1 prize against the Virizion, and now he's going to give up 2. He even got a free turn where I got double tails and did 0 damage. So that just kind of shows you how bad Darkrai kind of is against Vanilluxe, which is kind of shocking to hear, you know. Darkrai decks have been absolutely dominating Battle Roads. They have the most wins by far. And to say that Darkrai isn't good against an ice cream cone, that's kind of silly. But it's the truth. The only decks that are very good against Vanilluxe are ones that knock it out in 1 hit. And can be quick. So stuff like Zekrom Electric can be good against Vanilluxe, where they can start attacking early on with Thundurus to take quick prizes, and then follow up with Mewtwo to knock out Vanilluxe in 1 hit. With the Darkrai deck, it has the quick option to do 90 right off the bat, but it doesn't have the follow through. You might be able to power up 1 Mewtwo, but that's not very good. And also, your only real attacker early on is Darkrai, which is an EX. Thundurus, in the Zekrom Electric example, is not an EX. So I do Double Freeze. Looks like the 4th roll is off camera. So it was a heads, fortunately. It's a scary moment when you flip 2 tails and you have to reflip. For those of you not familiar with how flipping works with dice, the odds are tails, the evens are heads. So it's just faster to use dice instead of a coin. And there you can see the turns get kind of basic once you get a Vileplume into play and when you involve Paralysis. I mean, my turns are going to be, okay, maybe I'll play a Twins, I'll attach energy and attack. And my opponent's going to be, well, if I'm paralyzed, I can attach an energy, maybe play a supporter, and pass. So the turns actually start to get pretty quick once everything gets all set up. The unfortunate part, and this is why I included the timer in this video, if you didn't notice that before. Now the timer is just to illustrate my point that Vanilluxe is a very difficult deck to win with in a best 2 out of 3 match, because it's 60 minutes. Now, you're going to see how long it takes for Vanilluxe to just knock out even 1 Darkrai. Okay, I'm doing 40 damage at a time. Darkrai has 180 hit points, okay? That means if I'm doing 40 damage every time with Double Freeze, I have to use it 5 times before I knock it out. So, that's 5 turns of me attacking just to knock out a Darkrai. If you add this up, this is going to take a long time for me to win a game. So, if it ever got to a game where maybe the game got really long and drawn out, and I ended up losing, I wouldn't have any time to actually win a 3rd game in a sudden death scenario, because my deck is much slower than his. So, Vanilluxe, it really has to win 2-0 in a best 2 out of 3 series. It doesn't really benefit from a best 2 out of 3 unless, you know, you lose 1 game on the first turn. You can afford to lose a very quick game, but if you ever lose a very long and drawn out game, you're at an extreme disadvantage to winning the series as a whole. So right here I'm going to play another Twins, and I'm actually going to take the prize lead after this turn. So I'm not going to take another Twins, I'm just going to go ahead and take energy. I just want to make sure all my stuff is powered up. And I actually forget to use Hustle Step, I think. I don't think that'll make too big of a difference, but I did forget to use that. That was silly on my part. Trying to speed too quickly through my turns, which is important. I cannot stress that enough. If you're playing a deck like Vanilluxe, you actually do need to play very quickly in order to ensure that you'll win in these matches because of the time factor. Now here, you can see why this deck can work so well. He knocks out the Vanilluxe. Okay, I have the Rescue Energy attached. It all goes back to my hand. And right there, I put down another Vanillite, evolve to Vanillish, evolve to Vanilluxe. Hey, my board looks pretty familiar, doesn't it? This is pretty much the exact same thing I had on the field last turn, and now it's all back in play. So now I do remember to use Hustle Step, remove the 10 damage, and I'm going to go ahead and double freeze, and there's 2 heads. So I'm going to do 80 to that Terrakion, paralyze it once again, and really he's stuck. He cannot switch the Terrakion because he cannot play a switch trainer card. Vileplume blocks that from happening. He cannot retreat because he's paralyzed, and he cannot attack because he's paralyzed. So this is kind of the strength of Vanilluxe. It's actually a really good deck. The reason people stop playing it is because, well, the flips are always kind of a risk. It's a slow stage 2 deck. And, you know, during cities, there were decks like Chandelure that really kind of dominated Vanilluxe because when you think about it, Chandelure doesn't care if it's paralyzed. It just keeps using its ability anyway. And during states, people were more about Mewtwo. And just Zekrom Electric was pretty good. So it might make a comeback here now. But Vanilluxe took a dip in its popularity basically because of super fast decks that played a lot of Mewtwo's. Now that people aren't playing as many Mewtwo, it's kind of gotten a little hope again. So right now I did do another 40 to the Terrakion. It's paralyzed once again. It has 130 hit points, so it's still stuck there. My opponent is loading up that Mewtwo on the bench. That is something I have to worry about. And this is going to enter a scary territory for me in a couple turns. Not right now, because, I mean, things are looking up for me. And there we go, I do knock out that Terrakion. But the troublesome part's going to be right here. My opponent sends up a Mewtwo, and if he can X-Ball me here, he's going to get a knockout. And then all I'll have is that Vanilluxe with the energy on it, and I don't have any additional energy in play. Now, I was holding on to the Rainbow Energy in my hand. I only play 1 Rainbow Energy, and I like to save it for the V-Create Victini, so I can kind of get a reliable 100 damage to get the last prize, to get the last knockout of the game, because, well, you would rather just do 100 straight up than have to rely on double freeze over and over. It's just safer that way. So I decided not to attach the rainbow. But if I don't start drawing into a couple more energy, I won't be able to power up my benched Vanillite, and then maybe I'll run into some trouble if I run out of energy. But it looks like he actually does not have an energy for his Mewtwo, and he decides to retreat to Smeargle. And he's going to Portrait. Now this was actually a very strange decision, I must say. He had a Juniper in his hand that he probably should have used, but actually his deck was running pretty thin, so maybe not. He also had a Shaman in his hand, which he could have used to move the energy onto the Mewtwo, so I'm not sure why he didn't do that. A little confusing, but just an unfortunate spot anyway that he did not have an energy, because X-Ball would be 10 damage short of getting a knockout, which is bad. You don't want to send up a Mewtwo and then not take a knockout. And yeah, I actually catch a free turn there, and that's really going to make me be in a huge favorable position here. I can knock out this Smeargle, hopefully, if I flip enough heads, and I do flip 1 heads. So I can knock out this Smeargle, and I'll get down to 2 prizes, which means all I have to do is knock out 1 more EX, and I win the game. So this could not be any better for me right now. After I knock out this Smeargle, it's going to be... Nope, and I get 2 tails. Get to use Victory Star. Okay. So I do get the knockout on the Smeargle. And here, all I have to do is knock out one more EX and I'll win the game. So this is pretty straightforward at this point. We'll see if my opponent has the energy to pull this off in the first place. It puts down another Terrakion and goes for the Oak's New Theory. So he does need one more energy to use X-Ball for the knockout. That will... Now, I said I could still be in some trouble, and it still holds true. If he gets an energy, knocks out the active, okay, he'll knock out that Vanilluxe. The important part is the energy. And then I'll promote the next Vanilluxe, and if I were to flip 4 tails, he would knock out that Vanilluxe too, and all of a sudden, I don't have any attackers left. And by then, I mean I don't have any attackers with energy. I'll get the stuff back with Rescue Energy, but I'll be an energy short of attacking. So, this is still a fairly scary position for me. You know, if I just flip well, and by then I mean I don't flip 4 tails, which is pretty likely that I don't flip 4 tails, I will win. There's no question about that. But if I do flip 4 tails, I'm in a very dangerous position. Fortunately, I have the prize lead, which gives me some breathing room to draw another energy. But right here, I don't have an energy in my hand. We're going to take a look at my deck with Collector. Just grab any extra Pokemon out of there. Looks like I have 1 Water, 1 Rainbow left. So, not too many energy left. And I don't have any way to really draw into it. The only supporter in my hand is N, which is not a good draw supporter right now. So, I am very reliant on hitting heads with this Vanilluxe. Later on in the game, your deck does kind of clunk up with this Vileplume deck because you can't really get rid of any cards. It's not like normal decks where you can just play Junk Arm and discard the extra cards. So I'm very reliant on using Double Freeze here at this point. But I do get heads on the first one, so all is well in the world. The other thing I have going for me is, I said I did, or I am at 2 prizes because, and I draw the water energy, so that's pretty much going to seal it up, I think, unless I flip a ridiculous amount of tails. But I'm at 2 prizes, so if he ever gets down to 1 prize, I could play the Twins and search for my water energy anyway. So anyway, from here on out, it looks like I'm pretty safe to win. Getting that last Vanilluxe powered up, and I do hit the Mewtwo again for 40. It's a slow and painful death for Mewtwo, but at least you're losing, or you're dying to Ice Cream. I guess that's a positive, if you want to look at it that way. Nobody likes freezing to death, but that's okay. And my opponent actually extends his hand, and I say, wait, you have 10 hit points left. And he goes, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, I probably lose, but okay, I guess we'll play it out. But, yeah, Mewtwo does have 170 hit points. He has 10 left. And at this point, all I have to do is retreat and Frost Breath for 60, and I'll win. So, I will go ahead and retreat and do 60 for the win. That way I don't have to worry about flips. And he just shows me, yeah, all I have are trainers and sporters left, which is what's going to happen against Vileplume. So that was game 1. Really nothing too interesting in that game happened because I set up very well. He took a while to get on the aggressive, and when that happens, Vanilluxe is going to win almost every single time. So maybe game 2 will bring something a little different. Game 1 was pretty straightforward. I set up before giving up too many prizes, and then I just inevitably win. So we'll be right back for game 2, and we'll analyze a little bit more what happens in that game.